thank you so much for joining us. She's live for us in Cape Town. We've heard the comments from the Department of Basic Education. They were very good about communicating that just before the exams started. Are we satisfied that enough of that message has gone through and trickled down to parents, schools who are running these exam halls, as well as pupils, so that they know their rights?
Well, part of getting this message across is what we're doing now, is speaking about it and making sure that parents and learners, caregivers, teachers and exam officials know that there is this protocol that's been developed by the Department of Basic Education in consultation with the Department of Health, and that it ensures that learners as well as the invigilators are going to be safe when COVID-19 positive learners write exams. And in the last 2 or 3 weeks, there have been a few instances before the protocol had been well communicated to the public that learners were being turned away from exam venues. But since the protocol has been released, in the last week, we haven't received any similar reports. So it seems the message is filtering down, but we need to keep speaking about it so that learners' right to an education isn't violated, but also so that teachers feel that this is going to be safely done. And so parents can say, look, my child deserves to be, and it's their right to be accommodated with the correct arrangements being made.
Now, we live at a time where even normal classes sometimes are difficult because so many of our classes lack very basic facilities for real education to take place. We see those stories every single day. Classrooms that don't have roofs, desks that are not fixed and that kind of thing. Are we confident that these schools, our poorest of the poor schools that don't even have those basic facilities, not only have exam facilities for most of the kids to write, but then will also have facilities made available to them where these kids who need to write in isolation will be able to write their exams?
So an isolation venue can be a community hall, a church hall, it can be a room in a hospital, it can be a clinic, and if a home is deemed to be an acceptable exam venue, then that can also serve as what's called an isolation venue. And that tries to get around the fact that, as you rightly point out, we don't have enough classroom space in the first place, and there aren't all of the necessary resources in place in many of our schools, such as having a reliable water supply. But these isolation venues will have sanitizer in place. There'll be strict physical distancing in place of at least 1.5 meters, and it'll be tightly regulated that everyone is wearing a mask.
Now, you spoke earlier about hearing stories of pupils being turned away before they became aware of the protocols involved. We've heard over the last few months about the stigma being attached to COVID-19, and especially those who have indeed tested positive from COVID-19. And now you're dealing with kids in those very, very difficult teenage years, and indeed their families having to deal with this kind of thing. Is there a fear that because of the stigma attached to COVID-19, the age that these kids find themselves in, and this the tense period of writing matric exams, could lead to an even further entrenchment of the stigma attached to COVID-19 when they really need to be supported at a time when they need it most?
Yes, and that's why public education is so important. And from when COVID-19 first broke out, Equal Education made great efforts to take on public education, to explain to all its members who are in high school what COVID-19 is, to try and debunk the myths, and so that they would also understand how to be safe and that there wouldn't be a stigma attached, but also when we teach young people, they take these facts and these messages into their homes, which is really important. So the other thing that's important for this protocol to work is that as soon as a learner does test positive for COVID-19, they need to tell their principal. And of course, them and their family needs to be comfortable doing that and not feeling like there is a stigma attached to that. I think that before this protocol was issued, there was confusion because the Department of Basic Education had first said learners wouldn't be allowed to write. And then it took quite long for them to develop this protocol. But there is a circular, a formal written instruction that has gone to all schools, teachers' unions, and parent associations that tries to explain that even if you are COVID-19 positive, there's a perfectly safe way that you can still go about writing exams. And I think that also helps to debunk myths and to help reduce the stigma around having COVID-19.
Now, Leanne, before I let you go, I think if we had spoken in March of this year or maybe June of this year, it's almost unbelievable that we're sitting at a time where we're actually talking about matric exams actually taking place and exams in other grades actually taking place. We've made it this far, and yet there's such a long way to go because planning, of course, is already starting for the next year, and COVID-19 is still with us. We've spoken to your organization repeatedly. We're now talking about matric exams and COVID-19. We've spoken about the school nutrition program repeatedly, which you guys are still monitoring and still trying to spread the word about what people's rights are in that regard. Where are you and your colleagues at right now? You're still mopping up and dealing with issues that are prevalent right now, but 2021 and the school year is looming large, isn't it?
Yes. So our focus in the last 6 months of this year has been on school infrastructure and how the budget cuts affect that. That when you cut the education budget and when money is taken away and given to South African Airways, there's a very real impact on the ground where you have over 1,000 construction projects being delayed or being stopped. And of course, there are instances we know where a school has been waiting 4, 5, 10 years for proper toilets. Then our focus has also been on the National School Nutrition Program, as you pointed out. So we also now want to take this opportunity to tell learners and parents that even though it is exam time, you are still entitled to your meal. So the National School Nutrition Program must function fully until the day that your school closes. And if there is a second wave, the Department of Basic Education has in writing committed to that program, the NSMP, being rolled out, even if that should happen. And then our other focus, like I said, has been on the budget. Next year, when the finance minister delivers his budget speech, we're going to be saying reverse the cuts to education, give back the money to education, and also increase the education budget at least in line with inflation.
Leanne Jansen-Thomas is the Equal Education Interim National Coordinator. We thank you so much for your time this morning and indeed the great work being done by your organisation throughout what's been a very, very difficult year. We need more of that kind of monitoring and awareness being done by organisations.